Well, we've seen the first heavyweight clash of the Premier League season at Old Trafford. Manchester United losing 1-0 to Arsenal in a game where the scoreline I don't think reflected the balance of play. United having, you could quite arguably say one of their better league performances under Amorim, if not their best, against a really strong Arsenal side who I thought were off a gear, and I think that's maybe putting it a bit nicely. On the occasion, first game of the season, maybe a bit of rustiness, who knows? So there were pros and cons to this United performance, but ultimately they looked fitter, they looked more aggressive, and it felt like they understood the system more. It felt like they finally learned how to play with a three at the back system, and Jesus Christ, it's only taken about 30, 40 games. And it could be encouraging for United to take forward, but we're going to go over that on the ball phase first and see how that went. United still built up with their centre back inverting on the edge of the box alongside the holding midfielder, with De Ligt alongside Casemiro and Shaw and Euro as the wider centre backs on the edge of the box. This might be the first time I've ever seen it work. And it worked in many ways, not just in terms of them getting on the ball and playing forward, but also with how it freed up space elsewhere, either on the right or in the middle, and gave United plenty of options to play through. One of which would be with Gyökeres, who was on Euro initially to start with, but would come into Bayindir in this section here. And what this then created was, with the ability of De Ligt or Casemiro, it could also be Bruno Fernandes, depending on situations, just what's happened at that time, who both get pressed by the Arsenal midfielders in Odegaard and Rice, with Saka coming into Shaw. Gyökeres coming in slowly with no real aggression, with no real intent to press quickly to Bayindir. Bayindir could play this pass and could then wall it off to Euro, who could then take the ball forward from here. Dalot would then start charging forward to drag Martinelli away, giving Euro more space to go forward, and it gave them another dimension. Also, it wouldn't just be with Euro receiving it on this right-hand side to charge forward with the ball. De Ligt and Casemiro could look to create a passing lane for Bruno Fernandes, who would look to operate in this area of the pitch here, looking for any real open lane that he could receive the ball, if it was on the left, on the right, and he could find it through. And to be fair to Bayindir, as much as he's been heavily criticised for his role in the Arsenal goal, rightly so, dreadful goalkeeping, I actually thought his distribution was quite good. The only issue is that once he makes that mistake at the start, that's all you remember of the game. And even being there live, the fans got on his back a bit. But I actually thought his distribution throughout the game was fairly steady. Even when he was going direct, which we'll cover in a second, it felt like he weighted those passes perfectly for the players receiving the ball. If it was an intended aerial dual pass, then he played it to such where it gave the attacker the advantage. Or if he was lofting it for one of the attacking midfielders or Cunha to take a touch and get out of the feet, he did it really well. And it was by no means a bad performance. It's just that big mistake cost them a goal. And at the biggest levels of football, that's the killer. That is the expectation that you just can't be that responsible so poorly for a goal. But he was able to slip these passes through to Bruno Fernandes, who could turn and then look to engage in a more attacking opportunity. And Arsenal didn't really set up a clear way to deal with Bruno in this area here. You'd get occasionally Gabriel reacting to come and close him down. And that's because Zubimendi was more focused on closing down Mason Mount and sticking to him as the holding midfielder, and to the point where, with the fluidity that United had shown in that front three, Mason Mount could be so advanced that he'd have Zubimendi in the defensive line. So it felt like Arsenal were almost operating with a sort of 5-4, with Martinelli being this spare man that Diogo Dalot just took out of play. And if Bruno Fernandes can turn and play forward, then United could get in behind with the runners, with Mbeumo going in behind, with Dorgu on the left-hand side. And Mbeumo's pace and his movement was class in this area here, up alongside Calafiori. He gave him a lot of nightmares and was able to find passes through from here. Or he could receive it from the left-hand side, where United prioritised their play for the most part. And that would be through either Euro or whoever receiving the ball coming up into this right channel here. With the defence coming across to this point, and Mbeumo maybe pulling out wide as he would want to do, he'd stick a little bit further away from Cunha and Mason Mount. These two could take up positions that would occupy that Arsenal defence. It would bring Ben White narrow. And if Ben White got tucked in too close to Mason Mount, maybe Zubimendi was coming up closer to Bruno Fernandes to try and block that passing lane. If Odegaard and Rice were caught out of position, then that meant the switch could be onto Dorgu on this left-hand side, and he could find space outside of that Arsenal defensive shape, which he did a couple times, hit the outside of the post with a really good effort. The key part about United is once they found those direct opportunities, they had athletic profiles that could carry the ball with pace and quality to get the ball forward. Or it would just be straight through Bayindir going direct from the defensive point to those players higher up the pitch, to Mason Mount, to Mateus Cunha. And Cunha and Mount, I thought, were excellent with their fluidity and their combination play on this left-hand side. Dropping in with one of them occupying the defensive line, making those vertical, horizontal movements. Asked questions of the defence. Did Gabriel, did Saliba come, or did they stay? They didn't have a clear indication of who to go because Mount and Cunha weren't static with their positioning. And I felt like they combined really well on this left-hand side to either play through with each other with the support of Bruno Fernandes, with Dorgu making overlapping runs on the left-hand side, or playing through each other with either Cunha carrying the ball from deep, which he is fantastic at. He's a real unit when running with the ball at his feet. He's got such great running power. Or using this overload to draw the Arsenal defence over into this side of the pitch and then to find a little bit of movement through Mount, through Bruno, where they could switch the play to the opposite side and get Brian and Burmo in space, sizing up Calafiori in a one-on-one opportunity, which is where he thrives. You then also get the overlapping run of Diogo Dalot to try and give him a little bit of an option, and that might not just be for him to receive the ball for a crossing opportunity. It could be for him to maybe drag Calafiori down, which allows Mbuemo to move inside, and he can get a shot away on Raya. United attack that backline directly and fantastically with real quality, getting forward and using the dynamism of that front three, the fluidity and just the constant movement that really bamboozled the Arsenal back line and managed to get into good crossing opportunities on the left, on the right. The issue is those players that I thought were offering that quality weren't making the movements into the box to get on the end of it. There was a few times where United got into really good crossing opportunities with nobody to hit in the box. You're not in the box, you can't score, you're not going to win the games. It's as simple as football ever gets. And it was the one thing that I think was missing from that Manchester United attacking performance. Unfortunately, because there was a lot of really good things to like about it. They had a more direct threat in Benjamin Sesko, who was an option for crosses. He had a really good header, which forced a really good save from David Raya. And that's something they can build on. I can understand why Sesko didn't start. He only signed a week ago, didn't have a chance to play in any of the pre-season games. Mount had a good pre-season, and he's showing loyalty to players that he likes and trying to find ways that he can add some versatility to the system. And also Mount offered a lot of qualities that Sesko didn't have with his fluidity and the way he combined with Cunha. With Sesko in the team, though, that does give United a real great level of box presence. As much as he didn't look amazing when he came on, didn't have much chance to shine, he offered that. He was a threat, he was moving, he was physical, he was getting up against defenders, and he will be a nuisance if United continue to get into these really good crossing opportunities. But we'll go over something as well with Arsenal when they dropped deep and how United played through that. When Arsenal dropped deep into the shape, which they did as the game went on, especially once they got the 1-0 lead and in the second half, they were shutting up shop as much as they possibly can. It could be a 5-4-1 or a 4-5-1, depending on Zubamendi's positioning. Sometimes he can be in that sort of pivot position in between defence and midfield. Other times he could drop into the defensive line, depending on how much United were trying to overload that back line, which they would with Bruno Fernandes pushing higher up. And also, one thing that we didn't see a lot of last season was the bravery of the wide centre-backs who would be willing to push higher up and help overload their respective sides. Yoro coming forward, which did excellently. Luke Shaw, and it means that Dalot and Burma can take up high positions, pin back that back line, and Yoro can carry it into real promising positions and ignite attacks that way. It's showing a lot more bravery. It seems to be a lot more free than it was last season. It feels like players with the quality they have are getting the opportunity to express themselves in the system where they were not before. Obviously, with the added quality that's been brought in. And it just lacked that finishing piece, that final little piece of the jigsaw to make it look complete. But United were in control of this game from an offensive point of view, and that's more than you can say than any other performance they had last season in the league. So full credit to them. And if this performance keeps up, goals and results will follow. I firmly believe that. But how did they defend and how did Arsenal attack? Now, one thing I will say is when Arsenal won the ball back in defensive situations, they are the masters at killing their own counter-attacks. Anytime it felt like they had a promising opportunity to get a sight on goal, they just took the easy option. They didn't attack United well enough. The wide centre-backs and De Ligt and the whole team, to be honest with you, transitioned well defensively. but there's enough pace, there's enough quality, and with Gyökeres, there was supposed to be this new direct threat to hurt teams, and it was just a bit tepid. It felt like they were trying to retain the shape as opposed to going that extra risk to win the game, and I'm convinced you cannot win football without risk. You have to be able to prepare to lose to win games. That's the difference, I think, doing it at the top level, the difference between winning trophies and not. And I'm yet to see it from this Arsenal team. Gamble, push forward, flex your muscles that you can go and win this game. You're a ruthless winner. And I know this might seem like a little bit of a small thing compared to the whole story, which is winning a league or winning a major trophy. But it's just these moments that I feel like kill teams. You're good enough. There's quality in there. Kill teams. Don't worry about retaining shape. Don't worry about being counted on the other end. You've got enough attacking quality to make the most of what you get given. But they didn't. And so, as I say, we'll go on to the more standard attacking shape. Arsenal would build up in a sort of traditional 4-3-3 with back four split wide and Odegaard generally deeper alongside Zubimendi. It felt like he was deeper than Rice at points in the build-up stages to get on the ball. He's got more technical quality than Rice to receive the ball deep and turn on it and progress. And Rice, we know how much of a runner he is and how physical he is in getting up the pitch. With the front three high up, and United went fully man to man, which they tried to do a lot last season, rather unsuccessfully, like they did most things. And it would be with Cunha dropping into Zubimendi, with Fernandes on Odegaard, and Mount and Burmo coming onto the centre backs. Casemiro watching Rice. Again, if Odegaard was the more advanced one, then Casemiro would watch Odegaard, and United would adjust depending on Arsenal shape. United pressed well. They pressed so well that Arsenal did struggle to play out at points, and the profiles were right, and they maintained their distances fantastically. It meant that Arsenal went direct a lot and needlessly direct. It felt like they were overly trying to force the issue going through this United team, whether it's because they're trying to find channel balls into Gyökeres. Maybe they were looking at the fact that United were man-to-man pressing and thought that they could exploit space in between De Ligt and the wider centre-backs, which didn't really happen. To be fair, De Ligt managed Gyökeres, it felt like fairly comfortably. He's the one defender in this Manchester United team that can match Gyökeres physically, and he came out on top. I thought Saka and Martinelli were really poor in direct opportunities and were managed well by their wider centre-backs and couldn't really get on the ball. What Arsenal tried to do, which is something they've done a lot, was they tried to get the fullbacks involved very early on. And even if they went direct to the likes of Martinelli, to the likes of Saka, and they received that out wide, pulling Euro in, then you'd get Calafiori or White, if it was on the far side, making that movement in between Martinelli and Gyökeres to find the pass from Martinelli, to maybe find Rice on the inside or whoever who could then play the pass forward. This type of run is hard for their markers to track, especially when they've got powerful runners that Arsenal do. The issue is timing of the pass. The connection between the run and the pass wasn't on, and so Arsenal went offside a lot. United were concentrated and didn't drop in and mark any stupid runs without realising the threat. And it didn't really make United pay as much as they could have, but there was a little bit of threat with those runners from fullbacks that are hard to track for a pressing team. The issue is Martinelli and Saka getting the ball under control with the pressure from their markers didn't happen a lot. And it felt like the real connection from that deeper base to the attacking three came from the fullbacks for Arsenal, because there seemed to be such a disconnect between that midfield three and the Arsenal front three. It felt like they were too keen on trying to show for the ball to the point where they could all three be in this pivot position, which you never really want three pivots. I mean, the Casemiro could track in as well, and they could really force Arsenal onto the edge of their own box. And that just, again, enticed Raya to go more direct and more reckless and gamble on 50-50s. I mean, and the only thing that this could offer was that White could move inside, Calafiori could too, and maybe this would entice Rice to come out into a left-back position, Odegaard as well, and try and use a little bit of fluidity to open up that United shape and play through them. United, to be fair, were communicating really well, so it seemed, because when they needed to, they would pass off Mark as well. Let's just say if Calafiori is moving into this position with Rice dropping in, then Casemiro and Dalot, for example, on that side would be on the same wavelength to know that Casemiro follows the man in his zone, Dalot stays up with Rice and keeps in a relatively standard position for his own position. So it wasn't really inventive enough. It wasn't really as unpredictable. It felt like every exchange of play for Arsenal. Every interchange of position was telegraphed and easily scouted. And I also think that in Calafiori and Ben White, they lack technical profiles, physical profiles, yeah, but poor technical profiles to get hold of the ball and play forward. But you counteract that maybe with Zubamendi and Odegaard showing for the ball more. But again, they just were pressed well and then didn't offer the requisite quality for United, but didn't offer the requisite quality for Arsenal to be able to play out with. So you're in a bit of a catch-22 there. Now, when Arsenal moved into a more sustained attacking shape, which didn't happen a lot, fullbacks would be high. They'd either be out wide or inverted with Saka inside and Martinelli inside, or if the fullbacks are inside, then Saka and Martinelli would move out to the wide areas. Again, it felt like a lot was supposed to come through the fullbacks, but didn't really. Rice and Odegaard, again, being too distant from the front three. Rice not really getting the room because of Martinelli or Calafiori's positioning to make his trademark busting runs, because it felt like there was always someone in his zone that he couldn't really penetrate. And it felt like because of that gap between them and the front three, they were trying to force passes through. But United, when dropping into their 5-4-1, they were really compact, really disciplined, and just didn't give Arsenal a great deal of opportunity to play through them. It also felt like that they finally got the balance right. It's the first time I've seen them do it really well to this level, of the wide centre backs and the wider midfielders, of when they engage. And that would be, let's just say, if Odegaard pulled out into this position here, Mount would go to press, and then Shaw would quickly follow him up and press on the player in the half space. The distances were pretty small, so that wasn't an incredible jump. So Shaw wasn't risking leaving an amazing amount of space in between Dorgu and De Ligt. He wasn't having to travel far up, so we could quickly recover. And United vertically very compact, restricted Arsenal to a lot, and it just enticed Arsenal to play more reckless and play more direct and lose control in the game, which they've been so famed for under Mikel Arteta. And it was a game plan well executed. It got the off the ball shape right. As I say, they looked fitter, they were closing down, being more aggressive. And this is just a game where when you're up against a much better team, sometimes the luck goes against you. It happens. Arsenal on set pieces, poor from Bayern, and they win the game. But I'd love to know what you guys think. In a bit, lads.